Hello YouTube, my name is Isabella and today I'm finally going to be sharing with you my goals for 2021 and wrapping up the few goals I had from last year. I'm feeling dangerous today, clearly, with this outfit, so we're going to do this fast before I make a grand mistake and get red lipstick on a very white sweater. So let's do it! How do I want to phrase this? With 2020 being such a terrible year and a year that nobody could ever fathom what we were all about to go through, I rewatched my 2020 goals, by the way, and it's just so wild seeing that version of myself not knowing what 2020 was going to be, like, wild. But because 2020 was so difficult for so many aspects of everyone's lives, something that thrived for me was my reading. I had very little control over a lot that was going on, but something that I really decided to focus on and put a lot of energy into was reading. And so my reading was one of the very few bright spots of 2020 for myself personally, and I did succeed in a lot of goals. I set my Goodreads goal at 52 books. I do it every year now. It allows me basically no stress because a book a week is great. I ended up reading 107 books this year, which is shocking. I never thought I was going to get over 100. I really didn't think it was feasible for me, but I've learned a lot about myself and my reading habits this year, and also having to be inside for a large majority of 2020, that also helped me read more books. My biggest goal of 2020 was to get my shelves to like 45% read. At the time I was at 38%, which was not great. I ended up doing really well with that, and now my shelves are 53% read, so I'm officially at the halfway mark, and I'm really happy with that. I wanted to complete 12 book series. Technically it was a bit of a fail because I actually ended up finishing 10, but in my mind that was a success because in the year before that I only finished 2 book series in the whole thing. So it was a good jump, a good leap, and it's something I do want to keep an eye on still in the future. I wanted to read 15 tomes. I read 24. I wanted to read 20 Own Voices works. I read 41. I wanted to read all of Jane Austen's work that I had not yet read, which I did, and that's I'm really happy with, and like 5 literary fiction. So most of my goals, like trackable things, I succeeded in, and I have learned a lot from that. I do have some stats though that I want to share. I ended up finally tracking my reading this year through a spreadsheet, which was really interesting to see, like genre breakdowns, all that kind of stuff. And I used Fadwas from Word Wonders. I really like them and their channel, so I will leave a link down below. They had it so set up that even like there are graphs and stuff as you fill stuff out. The graphs are already pre-made, which is great because I like spreadsheets. I do not like the process of having to make them. One that is really notable for me is the age range of books this year. Really interesting. I read 61% adult, 33% young adult, and like about 5% middle grade. I had a feeling that I was shifting towards more adult, but that was a big surprise for me. I don't see that changing. If anything, I see myself reading more adult in the future, but it's the first year definitely that I've read more adult than young adult, and it was a very interesting shift for me. What else is one that I think that's interesting? Oh yeah, primary genre. Not a surprise at all. I think the breakdown is nearly 50% fantasy, 20% science fiction, 10% romance, and about 8% contemporary, which makes sense even in my head. Like the breakdowns of genres, that is not a surprise to me at all. Frankly, I'm surprised I didn't actually get the halfway point with fantasy. My ratings to me seem a little bit skewed. I'll pop the picture up here. So it looks like I've given a lot of 5 stars out, and that for a second threw me off because I've already been planning like my best of the year, and it's not like I have that many on there. However, I realized I did rereads of both the Poppy War and the David Bod trilogy, the books that were out in the series, and those are 4 books that I had already given 5 stars to, and that's what's skewing it. that way. So this year being the first year that I tracked my reading, this year being the first year that I really like paid attention to my goals all the time, because I like had a spreadsheet in my bullet journal and I would fill things in as I went. I learned a lot in terms of goals that I actively want to track and just keep an eye on versus stuff I actually want to work towards. Like, for example, reading big books is not a problem for me. It's not something that I really have to set a goal for, so it's not something that I have to share with here. It's just something for myself that I like to track and keep an eye on and see how that can ebb and flow throughout the years, but it's not something that I like actively need to work on. In terms of actual goals, like numeric things that I'm going to be working towards, my biggest goal this year is to read nonfiction. I, for the first time, am actively going to work towards reading nonfiction. I hardly ever read it. I think in 2020 I read one. I'm kind of embarrassed, to be honest, that I never thought to pick up nonfiction, especially ones that discuss topics that I'm passionate about and I want to learn about. I just always think of nonfiction as boring and intimidating, and I know that's something I need to change. I have slowly been accumulating a little stack throughout like the second half of this year, and that's my biggest goal. I'm going to read 10 nonfiction books at least. I figure one a month approximately, and like 2 months if I don't feel it, that's okay. If I read more, that's really great, but I think that's a good starting point. I really hope that I can succeed in this. I definitely need to change that, and that's my number one goal that I need to work on for 2021. I'm so used to saying 2020. My next goal is to get my shelves to 65% read. I'm currently at 53% read. Like I mentioned before, I have read 299 of the 563 books I own that like aren't duplicates. I want to just do what I did last year, not bring as many books in, focus on reading a lot of my own books, and just keep an eye on it. 65% read seems like really great, and just slowly start to close the friggin' gap that I've had for so long. It also drives me nuts that I couldn't have read one more book, so I could say I read 300 of the 563 I own, but it's fine. Whatever. Like, now that I'm thinking about it, I think I went down in the amount of books that I own because I did so many unhauls in 2020. Which is wild, because I think I was closer to 600 books purchased, which is something I would have never thought that it's possible for me to do, but oh wow. My next goal is to read 10 like novellas / short fiction. I have so many ebooks and like novellas that have been burning a hole in my like pocket that I've wanted to read, but I also can be really dumb sometimes and like guilt myself into not reading them because I'm like, oh, it's so short. Like, that's not a book. It's something that I noticed recently and I'm so annoyed by. Like, it's so stupid, truly so dumb. And I read a ton of big books, so I think I can balance them out, read a lot of my novellas that I've been acquiring from Tor with their newsletter, and there's a lot of like short fiction, I think also from Tor coming out this year that I'm excited to read, and I just want to prioritize them and allow myself to read them because they get put on the back burner a lot. My final goal is to reread 5 books. I haven't decided yet what those books are going to be. I just know that they can't be the Daevabad trilogy, the Poppy War series, or anything by Jane Austen, because I've reread them all a lot, and while I do possibly want to reread them in 2021, like I have to reread something that I haven't reread before. That makes sense? I really, really want to reread The Daughter of Smoke and Bone. I haven't read that series since 2016, I think, and I love that series. There's a couple like channel goals that I want to kind of keep an eye on and work towards. I really would like to work on getting an actual very consistent posting schedule. I usually post Tuesdays and Fridays being the main day that I usually never miss, but throughout 2020 there were times where I missed it, and I just want to get really consistent and organized with that. I'd also like to experiment with some content and do some different things. I really like reviewing, and it's something that I also want to focus on, but I'd like to try some different forms of content, some discussions that have been like burning through my mind for a little while. Something that I also know I need to work on is during my wrap-ups is explicitly mention trigger warnings and like do it consistently, because that's something that I will do some months and then forget to do other months, and frankly that's just irresponsible on my part as a creator. So I want to make a point to like do it and like actually have it written down in my notes. It will just make my life so much easier than trying to remember it when I'm on camera. Oh shit, I totally forgot to mention, this year I'm not going to be putting a number behind reading books, like own voices, stories. It's something that I did before, and there's been a lot of really interesting discussions this year about the term own voices and how it can kind of be limiting for like specifically authors of color, and it's something that I've had to think about as well. And this year I'm going to be tracking a whole lot more than just the few things that I shared with you like on my spreadsheets. I'm going to be adding some more things, and instead of focusing on the own voices aspect, I'm going to just be paying attention and making sure that I'm reading as many authors of color as possible, as well as other roots and forms of diversity. But specifically authors of color in publishing, they just don't get the same chances that white authors do in publishing. Like publishing is so white, so it's something I'd like to focus on, but I'm not going to put a numeric goal anymore because I don't want it to seem like I'm checking off a checklist. Now I can wrap up the video. 2020 was a lot for so many reasons, and one of the small bright spots was that I learned a lot about my reading tastes and myself as a reader, and I'm interested to see how that can shift in 2021. It's funny talking about 2021 because it's felt so mythic for so long, like we were never actually going to get here. Now it's here, and it's another year, right? Let me know down in the comments below something that you are going to actively work towards in 2020 for your reading. You don't have to tell me like personal goals that you're working on, but something that you've noticed that maybe you're lacking on and you need to fix, like myself. I just think it's really interesting, and I actually like this time of year a lot because I like the introspective part of it and like reflecting back and all that kind of stuff. So I'd love to know. I'm just an extremely nosy person. But as always, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you again very soon. Goodbye.